Welcome to the Innovate Europe podcast, where we talk to the founders and funders who are shaping the European innovation ecosystem, which is a thing. We're going to find out about it. I'm Clark Parsons. I'm your host. I'm the managing director of the Innovate Europe Foundation and the CEO of the European Startup Network. And I'm joined today by one of my favorite people working in Europe in tech. It's Andreas Klinger, who is also a member of the IE.F advisory board. But you're the founder and investor at Prototype Capital, most importantly for nowadays. You have been a globally active first check investor for quite some time now. I think you've participated in 90 plus deals, so you've really been around. A lot of great stuff, remote.com, Luma Labs, Fly.io, really an amazing portfolio. And before that, Andreas, you were part of the founding team and the CTO at Product Hunt, which many people know and love. I still get the emails all the time. You were the VP for Europe of CoinList and head of remote at AngelList, and finally the CTO at On Deck. So you've done a lot of stuff, and actually what's great is it's not a typical Werdegang or career path for somebody who is an investor now. So one of my favorite things,
in Europe.
In Europe,
But
that's
a quick
what I mean.
side note, it's VPE, stands for engineering, not Europe.
Well, that's funny. Misread that.
It's fair, given how much you work in policy. I fully understand it.
Yeah, I could probably come up with 10 things VPE could stand for. It's really, really great to have you here. And I would love really just to start by getting us from young Andreas to this really cool path. So take us from some of your first experiences working in tech and business to how you sort of got to where you were at Prototype. I'm just most importantly interested to hear how you get on this path, because so many young people, of course, have no idea how to break into the technology business besides just going to work at a tech company. It's just really interesting to hear what got you going this way, and when did you realize, okay, I'm going to go into, this is my thing, I'm going to go into technology?
So I have a very long, very confusing CV, actually. In almost all scenarios, I'm shortening it up a lot. But given you have been asking, when I was in high school, the internet became like the World Wide Web became a big thing. We had like this project run by the high school of like a school company. So they told us like we should earn some money and like sell something. And we're like, okay. Back then it was like 3D animations and websites. And I didn't really know how to get customers. So I did the most logical thing ever. I just walked into random offices on the way to school. Just like imagine you have like a small kid like in front of you. Do you need a website? And that's how the whole thing started. During my university days, I did what I called computer science prostitution. So web applications to any small companies that is willing to completely underpay me. And then at some point, I realized I'm actually making more money if I do two things. Number one, if I focus on specific niches. And the second one, if I just speak about myself in plural all the time and pretend I'm an agency. So what I did is I started an agency focusing back then on niche marketing, like Facebook apps, Twitter apps, all these kind of things. We had like some of the largest publishers in the German-speaking areas, customers like Axel Springer, Süddeutsche, like multiple radio stations and so on and so on. Did this for quite some while. The company is still around. Like my co-founder made a very, very successful business out of it actually later on. And along this journey, I was like experimenting with like ideas I wanted to do, the like products and businesses I wanted to start additionally outside of like doing agency work, and happened to start my first startup, which is very obvious for anybody who knows me, a fashion company. And in high, thank you.
Sorry.
I appreciate your words of confidence here. So it turns out like me as a complete nerd have no freaking idea about fashion. Given that context, it's hilarious that we managed to make cooperation with pretty much like the biggest fashion weeks in Paris, in London, with like we got investment from the founder of Net-a-Porter and like a few other crazy things, you know.
Was it a fashion tech company or a fashion design company like Dress Like Andreas?
No, it was like the idea was crowdsourcing of fashion, including production. And I did, I think, everything wrong that you would imagine a founder in the sitcom doing wrong. We had this, I have a photo still, which I need to like at some point like make public. It's me standing next to our flow chart of how our whole business process model looks like. Like, so from somebody has an idea to somebody buys the actual product. And it's like small little flow chart. Like you can barely read it, and it's 4 meter long. Like it's just like from the ceiling, and like me, like not even half of this size. So completely over-engineered mayhem. We raised money for this. Briefly very successful, and then fundamentally absolutely not. And then I did a few other things, and then ultimately I joined a friend of mine's project, which was Product Hunt, because it was like, hey, I need support. I think this is taking off. And back then, my assumption was that this will be a side project, and he won't have any money, but I will still do it. And all of a sudden, we got into YC, and then we had like investment fund by like literally every fund that I knew that had a good brand. Mm-hmm. Literally, the people who invested, like the list looked like the list that founders have when they start fundraising. So just like the whole list. And then I moved to States for 5 to 6 years. Was a founding team and CTO of Product Hunt. We got acquired. I joined multiple other teams. And then during COVID, we moved back to be closer to family again. And that's also when I got more active around European policy kind of topics.
Super, yeah. I mean, going to Y Combinator is sort of, getting on the rocket ship. What did that experience, but also just Product Hunt in general, teach you about launching? And I mean, that's what I love about that company is, of course, you had the front row seat to everything that was happening, because Product Hunt is for the people who want to know literally what's new today, what's coming out on the market. So you're like right there seeing every trend before it pops.
Yeah. So first of all, like to make this very explicit, I was founding team, which is a very glorified way to say employee. And it also means high risk employee who doesn't know if he gets paid. And then thankfully we have money to get paid. And I also did the European thing of actually properly discussing equity and everything when like all the stress was after us, So a lot of lessons learned here. Ryan was the only founder, like as in terms of a founder. And so like he was also like the only person officially joining YC. And I just joined all the events and parties I did on the side. I later on actually joined YC on my own, but that's a completely different story. With Product Hunt, like the interesting thing, what I realized for myself is you need 2 to 3 really stupid ideas to have one that's absolutely genius. Mm-hmm. And so like I was always like a big celebrator of if somebody did something uniquely stupid. You know what I mean? And something that just like clicks, but also like it's so fundamentally weird, And very frequently you saw like 2 or 3 iterations of this, and then like somebody came with an absolute genius move. Mm-hmm. That like use those learnings, like if you think of them as like product patterns or angles to a product or opportunity or an application. So like this was for me the biggest learning at Product Hunt actually, which I still fundamentally do believe to be true. And this is like why I highly appreciate people who just do stuff versus over intellectualizing until they have the ideal idea, Mm-hmm. Because you need those 2 to 3 really stupid things that you're afterwards embarrassed about to have like this one surprisingly good idea.
Yeah, but also because just as you said, the stuff that you don't think is going to be a hit ends up being a hit.
Absolutely. We had like a meetup in Berlin with Product Hunt. Was like meant to be 100 people. I think 300 or so came. And there was like one guy saying like, hey, we offered to people like they can present their products, like live Product Hunt. And there was like one guy like, hey, we did this thing like 1 weekend ago as like a hackathon kind of thing. It's really stupid, but it's so like we keep playing with it. Can we show it? And the idea was literally you moving your mouth towards like lyrics of a song and making a video of yourself. That thing became Dubsmash, and he raised a lot of money, became for a brief moment extremely successful. Like, I don't know how well it worked in the end for them, but like that thing got huge. But even he told us back then, I think that's a very stupid idea, but it could be funny. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it was. I mean, they were TikTok before TikTok. So
exactly.
Yeah, it's like one different algorithm, and the world might look different. You'd have the biggest unicorn sitting in Berlin still. You moved on into the investment world. You were at AngelList as well. So on the one hand, you got to see how the product pipeline and founders are working, but then you got involved on the investment side. by helping to be a part of this really renowned community of pooling angels. What did that teach you? What did you learn? Because you're suddenly on the other side of the fence looking at it, not just from the, let's embrace the stupid, let's build a product, but okay, how do I pick? How do I choose? How do I, nurture stuff?
Yeah. So for context, I was, as we said before, we got acquired by AngelList. So I was working at AngelList, and AngelList built the products to run your own fund. And back then we launched a product called microfunds, or angel funds, we called it back then. And so almost like as a work hazard, like if you work at AngelList too long, you ended up with a fund, you know? And I was always very, very interested in a meta level of startups. So like communities, like Product Hunt, AngelList, on like all of them are very much meta level, and I definitely wanted to do a small fund. One of the reasons was actually to be able to help friends of mine where I knew that they're doing something really interesting, to get them like somehow closer to investors. And like raising a small fund was like the right approach after I tried every other. My original thinking with the fund was like I wanted to pick a niche where I'm known for that niche and have a chance to actually invest in the best possible deals. The way VC works, as everybody knows, is pretty much the top small amount percentage actually builds successful companies and is worth investing, and everything else unfortunately won't. So unless you get into those, there is no point investing at all almost. So what I wanted to do is like in a niche, be known well enough that people send deals to me. And back then that niche was around global work, remote work later called. And so I invested in this whole idea of like global opportunities, but also like global workforces and like what kind of infrastructure and tooling is needed, but also second degree effects. And then COVID came, made me look very, very smart, and the downside of it was that all of a sudden the whole topic was no longer fringe and crazy people and like weird ideas. It was like HR people, So I switched more to investing basically in engineering heavy products, which is my own background, and have been doing this like mostly like States, Europe, and India, but like technically globally. It's actually the thing I do now full time, which I'm personally really excited about because I had doing like the first fund next to being a full time CTO, and imagine doing investments and then in parallel you like, for example, at OnDeck we scaled from like 20 to 300 people in a year. Like I was fried after that. I was fried. So I'm actually like, for me, like I'm actually happy that I'm now just doing like investing, YouTube, and policy work, which is like comparison like easier. You asked about like how is it different? To me, the biggest learning is you can have a good product, you can have a good company, and you can have a good VC case, and then the three most might not overlap, and you can appreciate all of them for different reasons. If this makes any sense, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there might be people building good products that never become good company or good VC cases. People who build horrible products that become ridiculously good companies, but also no VC cases. And people who build amazing VC cases and having no idea how to build good product and maybe never make a company that makes revenue for some reason, but it's still surprisingly good VC case. And the three might not overlap. Ideally, they overlap, but you can appreciate them differently. So I still appreciate good products, or like interesting, unique new products. A lot of friends of mine are in the indie hacker scene, which are building very, very successful companies that you could never ever invest in. And hopefully they never ever take money by VC, but it would break the company. So like this differentiation was for me the biggest learning.
Yeah. You've developed a lot of antenna now, I think, also to differentiate between those three. Do you find yourself now sort of just automatically, when you find somebody who's got one of the three, advising them and quickly trying to get them to a level of viability in the others? I mean, I imagine you start becoming much more, really, you just say, let it be. That's the way it
No,
is.
it really depends. It really depends on the individual case, on the founder. There's people who are like the most amazing product builders that should never do VC cases. There are people who are really, really good in company building that should never do VC cases. I mean,
But somebody has to tell them that.
yeah, I mean, I'm like always like, I'm notorious for helping people where I have no financial stake in, unfortunately. But that's doable. But like this is what also like about the current cycle of VC. During the whole SERP phase, literally everything was getting money so easily that it's almost like forced on founders, if this makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a lot of investments that just raised too much money or shouldn't have raised money at all.
Mm-hmm.
And in hindsight, like I genuinely believe VC money can be dangerous. There's a certain amount of money that a company can absorb at a certain stage, and anything above that, and especially if it's a magnitude more, will break the company. And I had investments where the founders raised $1 billion. Like I was like first round, for example, at Hopin. I was first round at Clubhouse. I was like multiple others. You know what I mean? There's an amount of money where the company breaks. And I was also like in companies that, like with OnDeck, we raised a crap ton of money and that can break your company. At Product Hunt, back then we were the most hyped, most successful company on our YC batch. And we raised at the back then insane valuation, I think of 20 million or something, which is nowadays like very normal for a lot of founders. But back then unheard of, like crazy. Money itself is like a tool, like at a little bit, like too much money, the tool switches to becoming like, I don't know, kerosene that burns down your house, if this makes any sense.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Is there, I mean, actually, in a way, this is maybe kind of reverse psychology. Europe tends to have less capital to deploy at some of the stages than the US. Is this theoretically a bit of an advantage for European founders? Because I always feel like Europe is underfunded with all its great startups, but maybe they're not so, drunk on the capital in Europe.
Yes and no. You don't need much money to get drunk. You can just get cheap alcohol. The problem in Europe, in my opinion, is more that there isn't enough investors who are comfortable pushing founders to build number one companies, although a lot of them would say it. Most investors want companies that things that can work in Europe, quote unquote, whereas what we should actually invest in is foundational innovation that moves the GDP. And this kind of like hyper ambitious, aggressive, like almost like giving founder the permission to do something insane. That's the thing that's missing, in my opinion, in European VC, and that goes together obviously with, as you mentioned, like especially mid and late stage, there isn't enough VC capital here, mainly because institutional investors aren't allowed as much to invest in VC funds in Europe. A larger US fund has like 20 to 30%, for example, from pension funds. In Germany, I think it's like less than 5 or 1% or something like that, like ridiculously low. And so it's like also a pure volume thing that's definitely missing. There's like a self-fulfilling prophecy here, of course.
No, absolutely. I mean,
But yeah,
we'll get into it in a second about
yeah,
the
please.
EU Inc. movement and everything. I'd love to just keep going a little bit on this process of you getting to where you are now with this prototype capital. I love the statement you just gave about we need to push founders to be more ambitious. And when I see the investments you're already making with Prototype, I mean, it's clear you're looking everywhere for really breakthrough, borderline crazy at first glance, really cool stuff. With Prototype Capital, obviously your goal is to make money and return the fund, but you do seem to be working with a different agenda too, which is to push this kind of breakthrough tech. How did you get to this kind of thesis with Prototype, and how did you find investors who are ready to jump in and say, yeah, I'll do that?
So for quick context, just to name a few examples, like my last 4 or 5 investments, a French company doing a browser entirely built from scratch for AI agents, so like 10 times faster than anything. If this works, is a foundational infrastructure for AI, for agents, for everything. A company in Slovenia called Sunrise doing robots for manufacturing, but like not for like large scale car manufacturing, but like small shops that regularly need to change their internal layout. If that works, that's like a $1 trillion market that needs automation. I invested in companies doing self-driving for construction vehicle, like 100-ton plus. The idea for those is, in most of these cases, if they work, they allow a whole industry in Europe, and usually an industry that's like foundational, hopefully, to our next 20, 30 years, to jump into the next needed evolution stage. With Fund 3, like that's the one that's currently launching, all of this is very explicit. So like the whole fund will be around the theme of like pushing Europe, making a hyper ambitious Europe and all this kind of stuff. The main reason why I do it is because I genuinely think it's needed. I genuinely think that if Europe doesn't find out a way to get tech innovation working properly and be a place that the best founders want to stay at, it's not like we are losing, these and these founders, and we maybe don't have these and these companies and like la la. It's we won't have all these premium jobs that create the premium living that Europe relies so much on. Like we pride ourselves so much about the quality of life here. That's because we have companies here that can charge a premium for what they do because they're like the world leading at this. And in economic terms, like high productivity jobs. All of these jobs in the last 20 years were all created in the States. Like it's all around tech, software, and AI. Before that, it was like manufacturing, cars, trade, banking. We had all of those. All of the current generation, we don't. So either we get this working here, or Europe will become best case a customer for the States. And that's like the best case scenario. More realistically, we'll be commodity provider. And that's extremely existential risk, especially given that the global world order is shifting as we are in to some extent, global economic crisis since COVID. And after this crisis, the world order will be reshuffled and we need to decide where we want to end up with. And if we don't make this decision actively, like every other player will just like push for their own interest. And we cannot rely on our partners to have our interest in mind, given everything.
Absolutely. This is, it's great to hear that. This is exactly why we're happy you're part of the IE.F, because this is the mission that we're all sharing. When you, at the founder level, at the company level, when you see what's going on here in this kind of threat or opportunity, what are you noticing with European companies compared to companies elsewhere that are particular stumbling blocks? Or are you trying to find the ones that have freed themselves mentally and don't face it? Or, and we'll get to EU Inc. in a second, because I know that's a topic really near to your heart. But anything, when you look at your portfolio of the companies that are working in Europe that you've invested in, what are some of the challenges they face besides, let's say, the single market fragmentation? Is it just this lack of ambition, or is there anything else that you think is still something that the European founders need to add to their skill set, or something that's missing?
I'm very much a system theory thinker. So for me, everything has like usually comes from like some fundamental system issue. In tech, scale is extremely important, and power law in any system, from distribution to funding to you name it, creates an insane advantage for anybody who can leverage scale better. Their unified blocks are a big advantage. China, India, USA, they have systematically huge advantages. For them, it's way easier to leverage scale compared to Europe, where it's like really hard to scale anything, mainly because you're jumping from one little pond to the next one. That being said, we have one advantage in the current VC cycle. It's right now all about deep tech, hardware, research, heavy innovation. In those cases, very frequently customers do not care as much where you're based, as long as you're the world leader in A, B, C, and D. And that's like a big advantage compared to the previous cycle, which was about consumer tech, about media, about all of these kind of things. In those cases, the European competitor to Facebook or Tumblr or you name it never had a chance. This is why we all use YouTube, Netflix, all of the, in deep tech, in hard tech, in robotics, in all of these aspects, there's a legit claim to be made that this is a different playing field. But you still have the issue of scale. Mm-hmm. So there is no way around not fixing scale as an issue.
Absolutely.
And what do founders need in Europe? Of course, they need more ambition and more confidence and whatever, but like they also need a system where that can be applied. You know what I mean? It's not like you can fantasize the reality around you. You know what I mean? You need to have it. Like this is kind of like the job of like, I wanted to say people like you, but like maybe people like us, to
you now.
Damn it.
One of us.
Policy, not even once.
Hey, I'm a former founder who stumbled into this policy world.
Fair enough. Yeah. Like that's basically our job to push the system to like fix systematic issues. There is no way around this. Like people, like you said before, like single market and whatever. It's scale. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Continental scale is the biggest asset in a world of giants, as like our president said.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this actually is the perfect lead in then to the movement that you helped initiate and give a name to, which is EU Inc. Tell me about the moment. I mean, you've probably had these thoughts for 20 years, but what was it that triggered? I think it began with a LinkedIn post. Maybe it started before then, but that was the triggering event I saw. I think it was last summer. You just wrote from the heart and got on and wrote, a really beautiful kind of rant in the best way possible about like, something's got to change. This is crazy. What was the key moment that made you do that? Did you have an encounter that day, or is it something had been building up? What led you to do this kind of cry from the heart?
So in the States, I regularly had discussions about like US versus Europe constantly. And it was very funny or frustrating to me because most of my American friends are like hardcore American friends. Like they're as US pilled as you can be. And
I'm only
basically
half.
it came down to like Europe has too much socialism and not enough capitalism. And I'm like, yeah, but there's also like systematic disadvantages, you know? And then, you know, somebody says something really hype and then you come like, wait a minute, there's actually systematic issues here and here and here. You don't really win the discussion, you know what I mean? So I was like, yeah, I had this a few times, but somewhere last year, early last year, a lot of the online talk about Europe shifted from kind of like, you know, not taking it too serious to almost like becoming extremely negative and like bashing Europe.
Yeah.
You know, and that was like for me also like the moment where like, okay, this is getting like too far, but it become like almost like hostile. Like some founders were like absolutely hostile, like some investors were absolutely hostile on Twitter, especially. So my thinking at that point was basically something needs to change. And a friend of mine at that point, like I was thinking of like launching some European community, pro-European community or something. Couldn't find a name. A friend of mine like launched like an online community, EUAC, basically like made a post about this. And I was like, hey, like let me also write something. And then the whole idea was what actually would be high leverage change improvements. And the main argument I made is the biggest step function improvement that you could do for founders in Europe right now is making incorporation and early investing as easy as possible across Europe and like being able to use European scale, being able to for example, you're in Germany, have investors from Finland, from Poland, from anywhere, maybe the UK, maybe the US, maybe Japan, like very quickly and easily invest in you. And by that, essentially unifying the ecosystem. And that, from my point of view, was a very easy, obvious step function improvement. So originally the idea was actually to do this completely private market. So I was like evaluating how to use Estonian or Luxembourg entities to basically do like transparent holdcos. And then along this time, a letter like wrote about the 20th regime, which until then was like, everybody told me it's like a meme. It's like, yeah, that would be the right solution, but will never happen.
You'll never
You
get
know?
it. Yeah.
And then we were like, okay, screw this. Like, this is actually the right solution. Let's push for like doing a proper European solution and not like a hack, you know? And the proper European solution is like you standardize on European level and then make it available to founders anywhere in Europe. And so we like worked on this, and we is like investors, the people who did not optional, multiple legal people, and people of like the Allied for Startups and like other like just like experts in this industry, I would say. And we worked on this and figuring out like how can you use the 20th regime to make this real, right? And this whole thing became what we in the end, like I originally wanted to call it the European Inc. And then the guys of Framer helped us with launch marketing. They did the website in 24 hours or something. Completely insane. I've never seen that. And they also were like, nope, that name is crap. You know, it's the EO Inc. Done. And I'm
Done.
like, okay, cool. So like big shout out to Jorn in this moment, like the founder of Framer. Like literally they called it, I forgot the name, but they had like a funny name for it because they literally put the whole company on hold and had like multiple people of their own team, the founders included, like just like making our launch happen. Because I originally did the website, I sent it to him and I was like, would you be one of the first people to sign this? And it's like, he was like, there's no freaking way I've signed anything on a page that ugly.
Yeah, I think it was something just like a type form. I mean, it was.
Yeah. No, it wasn't. If you're generous, yeah, if you're generous. So they cranked the whole website. We launched. We had, I would say, the who is who of European tech in signing it, from Patrick Collison to Paul Graham to the founders of Wise, of Bold, and every startup association, especially thanks to your help, every VC fund, and we managed to use that momentum to then work with Oric and Bird and multiple other legal teams to figure out in detail how this could work. So it's not just like, here's an idea, please figure it out, but like, here is the actual detailed idea. And yeah, the rest is like a lot of meetings in Brussels where you have been a significant part of as well.
I don't know if I should say happily or not. Working through the millstone of policy. For those who aren't familiar with it, I mean, you mentioned the Letta report. So Enrico Letta, one of the former prime ministers of Italy, was tasked by the European Council to come up with a report about what should we fix. And so his report was really, it was sort of a 1-2 punch last summer. First, we got Enrico Letta's report. I think it was titled More Than a Market. And that was where the 28th regime was mentioned. And the funny thing is, it's like this great white whale. You meet these people in Brussels who are like, yes, the 28th regime, we've been working on it forever. So I mean, it's just fascinating the fact that kind of an old idea, if you will, um, took on a life of its own with the next generation of the tech community to say, yes, 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 that's exactly what we need.
But you have to like, it's really hard to get this across. Like it was literally like a meme. It was like you mentioned roughly an idea, and somebody and it just instantly says, "Ah, yeah, 20th regime will never happen."
Yeah, I know. It was crazy.
Like Pavlov, like this, you know.
Absolutely. I mean, it's like, those old metaphors about how, a few generations into raising sheep, you take away the fence, but the sheep all, transmitted to their offspring that there's a fence there and you can't go any further than that. And so they never move. And so you meet these people in Brussels who are like, I mean, I still meet people running, trade associations that should be really excited about this new push for a 28th regime who just say, never gonna happen, never gonna happen, abandon all hope, ye who enter here. And so you just keep thinking, well, okay, I guess I'm the latest idiot who's going to try, but if we don't do anything, nothing will happen. I can really guarantee you that. How does the movement you set off tie in with the millstone of what's happening in Brussels right now? You are still, I mean, I see you getting invited and speaking a lot. You and your movement are still very engaged there. But I mean, it could be a full-time job, and you've managed to still keep it going, even though you're running a VC fund.
I mean, everybody in our team is doing this volunteer based next to quote unquote real jobs. One of the reasons why this is possible is because a lot of people are putting their life's work into doing really good startup associations, you know, and your umbrella association is obviously a part of that. And therefore it's possible to like come with like one spearhead project, you know, and use this almost like these bridges that exists. If those associations wouldn't exist, there would be no way that we would have even pulled this off. So like this is, I think, one of the reasons why this is even possible on the side. The current state that we are at is we were so successful with this whole thing that in Brussels, in many cases, almost like every solution in roughly this direction is called EU-Inc., which is very confusing and also very frequently not really helpful, because we made a very specific proposal, and we are happy to learn and change it if people have good arguments. But it's a very specific solution. And like one of the main things, like we ask basically for two things specifically. One is that it's for everyone, not just like for quote unquote innovative startups, because you never know how the next generation of startups look like,
exactly.
or like what it's also hard to say what's a good investment case, even for investors. And we fully understand that member states would now be very scared that like their biggest companies become startups in disguise, you know, like, oh, it's not Siemens, it's 5 startups in a trench coat, you know? So the solution to that is to try not to have any goodies in there, like no tax incentives, no, like for example, like we would push for the fact that taxes and employment stay still on national level. So as a German, this wouldn't be a way to get around like unions, for example, you know what I mean? Do we think this is the perfect solution? No, a perfect solution is a button that I press that solves every problem I have in life, you know? But that's a compromise that can pass member states. So like for everyone. The second one that we push for is that it should have one centralized registry and use this as a moment to actually have a clean slate start. Like people always talk about leapfrogging, like now doing one proper registry on European level and that's digital, like, you know, like websites, it's a thing, you know, has an API, you know, is like properly standardized, and you have like a new entity to like basically avoid all of the legacy mistakes. Keep in mind, it's like 27 plus countries. So there is a lot of like legacy and differences between them. That could be a leapfrog for all of the digitalization needs that European founders have. You know what I mean? Because quite frankly, in multiple countries, even digitalization is still an issue. You know
Absolutely.
what I mean? Not speaking of like being able to incorporate within a few hours without any notary, being able to have an API to access your shareholder cap table and all these kind of things. You know what I mean? So that would be a leapfrog opportunity right now. So this is like one thing we push for, and not to have like a random compromise where, yeah, it's not the EU-Inc., it's like the GmbH with an asterisk. And now it's like, you know, like GmbH 2000.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
you know?
I was in a call recently where the commission was asking all these representatives of member states, like, okay, should we do one thing or should we let everybody kind of do their own national version? And somebody, just sort of indignantly said, we don't need 27 28th regimes. I mean, this is the whole point, was that we get one thing. So,
Yeah.
and it's a great point you make about, one single registry. We already do this with copyright and, intellectual property office. So
Mhm.
it can be done. It is done well at the European level with sort of one certified registry. And also to echo your point, it's a really great one about tax and labor. I'm an American. I've set up companies. I've set up a Delaware Incorporated while sitting in Tennessee. So, everybody who has a company in the US is used to state level labor law, state level tax law. The states compete for that still, but we
Mhm.
all can have one national corporation that people can invest in quickly and
Yeah.
easily. So, I
This
mean,
is the
it's
this is the funny thing. Like people don't realize how much our EU Inc. thing is actually similar to the US thing, or the US is completely set up differently. Like that's I agree on that. Yeah.
what's really crazy is people. I say this in Brussels all the time, and it's an idea that I also developed after hearing you guys talk about it. There's no reason why this can't become something that someone in the US or India or China wants to set up. I mean, if Europeans are setting up Delaware corporations all the time, why can't we make it so attractive that Americans set up an EU Inc.?
This is I by the way one of the things I don't dare to talk about publicly, because like apparently what we suggest is already like outlandishly ambitious. There is no reason why the UK wouldn't also be part of the EU Inc.
Absolutely.
registry. There is no reason, for example, that African states adhere to it. So yeah,
Ukraine.
exactly. There's multiple areas where it makes sense for countries, because the main thing that we do is we standardize corporate law, we standardize incorporation, we standardize the cap table, like a few of these things. All the main thing that this does is just make it easier to invest into your country. This is like why it's funny to me, because like people will be like, yeah, Hungary is against this most likely. No, don't know. Let's see. And I'm like, I don't know. Like they're very business savvy. They want more money into their country. You know what I mean? Like I don't even think they would be against this. Let's see. Like let's find it out.
I think they should like it because most of their unicorn founders set the company up in London or the U.S. I mean, this is kind of the myth of we're going to lose something. A lot of the states that are theoretically going to be against it have nothing to lose because their founders aren't even setting up in their home country anyway.
Yep.
Yeah.
Also, like from the point of view of an investor, like there's maybe 3 entities in Europe I would touch. Because I have to. Like Germany is like surprisingly annoying if you don't have a GmbH locally. But there's so many, like I wouldn't invest in an Italian entity unless there is like a really established lead investor who convinces me that everything is kosher. And
Yeah.
I live next to it almost. You know what I mean? Or like Poland. Like I don't even know what the Polish entity is called. I used to have this game at meetups where I put like the acronyms of like European
I've
entities,
seen that.
and additionally like like acronyms for sexual transmission diseases, and asking people like which one is an entity, which of them is like an STD. And it's hard. Like it's even people who work in policy don't know. So yeah, and expecting to like from a random angel who is asked to be like the first investor of a young startup, like, hey, figure out the legal details, find a local lawyer, like figure out if the founder did everything right or like tries to rip you off,
Yeah.
like all these things, find a local tax authority telling you like if you actually have to pay taxes afterwards in this country. Like all of these gotchas will kill early stage momentum. And that's the main beef I have in Brussels when people tell me we have enough startups, we don't have enough scale ups. And I'm like, nope, we don't have enough early stage momentum. And this is the reasons why. This is one of the reasons why.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's not just scale, it's also speed. Final thought on this. If I'm a fan of the EU Inc. movement and maybe I've even signed, how could a founder or a VC or somebody in this ecosystem support you right now? What's the best thing that people could do?
We are currently at the stage where Brussels is a big fan of it. So the next step that we have to do is like two steps. Like we have to make this on Brussels and on national level, a thing that the leaders want. So what this means in practice, if for some reason you're well networked to prime ministers, ministers, presidents in your country, that would be a very useful introduction right now. Like anybody who works like in actual leadership government or like very close to it, that would be a very useful introduction, because right now we need to get those leaders to be actively, vocally supporting it. As you know, politics is very much about like political buy-in. So if a lot of people are for something and there's like a vocal people actually, like if Sweden would say, yes, we want this, then like Poland says, yes, we want this. Like that kind of things allows Brussels to be a little bit more brave with their own assumption. And that's currently the state we're at. Also, if you know any other high leverage political person right now, that those kind of introductions would be gold.
Super. That's good to know. So everybody Andreas's DMs are open on 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 X, I presume. So
yeah, or like email me, like firstname at lastname.io, like Andreas at Klinger.io. And I expect your audience is obviously only the people who know like the top leaders in the world.
of course, yeah. The
Okay,
all 10 of our viewers and listeners know personally the presidents of each member state. Yeah, we'll make it happen.
good.
Let's turn to something that I know you also love before we
Mm-hmm.
wrap things up. Hacker houses. I know that's
Mm-hmm.
something dear to your heart. That's grown out of your work as an
Yeah,
investor and
it's
thinking about this. You love to think about systems, and for you, this seems to be kind of the next system hack for Europe.
yeah.
Why have you gotten there? For this is something that we need.
So it's not just hacker houses. Like one thing I realized is if I look at the places where really unique, high ambitious talent comes out from, it's usually peer driven. It's hacker houses, hacker spaces is a very good example. Other ones are like student groups. Like several of Germany's unicorns come out of a student group called CDTM in Munich, which is completely student run, officially aligned with the TUM, like the Technical University and the LMU in Munich, but they run their own show. Like they choose who comes in, they choose the program they do, whatever. Like all of this kind of stuff is local. In Austria, there's like an excellency group. They call it like a gifted program, but in one school where the one teacher just on their own decided to do now like a program for like really talented kids, very selective who can join, you know. And out of this group come like some of the best new engineering and founder talent that I've ever seen in CEE. There is people out of this group who already built companies that raised $500 million. You know what I mean? And the funny thing is, I can go on forever. There's like a hacker house in Finland called Freight that literally got like a hotel, you know, and there's crazy engineering talent living there. But one thing that they all do, which I found really interesting, is they don't push those young kids to start startups. They're not accelerators, they're not incubators. What they do is they are very intentional on selecting high skilled people and then letting them work on whatever their obsession pushes them to. And I genuinely think that we are undervaluing obsession in Europe. Like being absolutely obsessed with a topic is the first step to building a number one company in that kind of space. Even if the company comes like 2-3 years later, doesn't matter, you know? So this self-selection where like really ambitious, obsessed people pick other really ambitious, highly talented, obsessed people and like just spend a lot of time together, I think is one of the biggest growth unlocks that we currently have in Europe. Because there's this saying that you are the average of the 5 people around you. So one thing I want to do next is like find ways to support these kind of projects that improve the 5 people around ambitious people. And yeah, so this is like its whole podcast by itself. Like I want to like wrap it up here. But if anybody out there is like working on these kind of projects, please hit me up. The surprising fact is you don't need much. You literally like some of these quote unquote hacker houses are just like flat shares of like young people doing crazy stuff. You know, some of these groups start out as like people working on the weekends together. There's a TUM AI in Munich as well, like doing ridiculously good projects and like founders coming out of that. Also, there was like a group of people who just like explored AI together. There is TUM Boring. That's like a group of, funny enough, all of them are named TUM something because they're all in Munich. And many of them have like very loose associations with the TUM. But genius move by the TUM to make that happen, the branding at least. For example, TUM Boring started because some people wanted to join the boring competition by Elon Musk. You know, out of that again came like a very, very good startups, multiple actually. So I don't know what it is, but like getting highly obsessed people around their interest, ideally like self-selecting together and let them spend a lot of time together, especially in these quote unquote young formative years, is game changing. And I believe if we find out ways to scale this properly without like losing the essence of it, we can easily create way better talent pools here than anywhere in San Francisco.
That's great. Then let me actually, I'm ready to go to what we kind of call the lightning round, which is to just do some quick questions to wrap us up. What would you be doing if you had to start over? What sector would you pursue your career in right now?
It's like start over today.
Yeah.
Right now, the most interesting. So, haha. There's multiple technologies right now at a tipping point.
So you'd be in tech.
Dude, I would be in tech if there's no money in it.
Yeah.
I don't, 100%. There's multiple technologies right now where there's a really, really interesting tipping point. the most obvious one is computer vision. So we are now at the point where we not only can say, what do we see? We can take an image, make the image into a video, make the video into a 3D space, rotate this 3D space, take this 3D space, make it into a computer game, make the computer game into a simulation that the robot is using to reasoning about the space around it. It's like insane. Okay. So right now, computer vision is like one of these fields I think is like a tipping point. Another one is robotics. So like if it's right now, like, hey, I'm like everything, like I'm young, I don't know what to do. I need to have a job in 3 years, career, whatever. I go into robotics, computer vision, this kind of area. If I'm a little bit more like, okay, zoom out, I have like bigger time and everything, I would look for anything that's foundational infrastructure and that's full stack, where like fundamental full stacks are needed. So energy is a huge one. We are like in I would say in the next 10 years, we'll have a tipping point in fusion energy. And that's like no brainer to join right now. Material science, we're at the point where you have AI models coming up with new chemicals, new materials, and you have now the point where you can use robotics to automate the testing of those. So realistically, we will have a completely different approach to materials in like 5 to 10 years, because it's just fundamentally new, like specialized materials will come out. And in almost all cases, when you have like a leapfrog technology, you have a material science discoveries like before. Like the reason why we have the iPhone is like dozens of material science innovations, and all of a sudden you can go with that and like apply like this kind of like scaling to it, what I mean? So that's going to change like pretty much everything. Space tech in Europe, space tech is unfortunately horrible because ESA funding is exhausting. Germany doesn't know if whatever, like hard, but space tech in principle is like right now at a tipping point. Yeah. Like all of a sudden it makes sense to develop things in space, in near orbit. It makes sense to do wafers for semiconductors in near orbit all of a sudden. You know what I mean? Like this is like insane sci-fi, like not even 5 years ago. Speaking of it, semiconductors. If I would start anything right now, semiconductors, gorgeous area right now. We're talking analog, we're talking photonics, we're talking quantum. There's like, there's not I wouldn't be surprised if somebody pitches me like semiconductors using ropes and levers, because like there's so much people rethinking how semiconductors should look like. So that's an insane industry. I can go on forever. Like we can make the whole podcast about this, but that's like right now, if you're young and you're considering going into tech, it's almost like an abundance of genius fields where like right now is a tipping point, like right now in the sense of like now in the next 5 years. So, and we haven't even spoken about AI, which is like the fundamental for many of those.
Yeah, that's what's so crazy is all of these things are feeding on each other or reinforcing each other or making the exponentiality
Yes.
Just get really contagious. Yeah.
We're at the point where software enters like any kind of like changes like almost every other field on a scale like unseen before. I will wrap here because I can I can literally do a whole podcast about this now.
We should come back sometime and do it. Yeah,
happy to.
Well, let's wrap up with I'd love to hear, and it doesn't have to be about tech, but what is something you love about Europe? You went to the US, you lived there, you obviously felt like you wanted to come back here. Mm-hmm. What is it you love about this place?
I generally think that Europe can easily be the best place to live and innovate in the world. And what I love about Europe is like inherently flawed, but okay with it. I'm not talking like disadvantages. What I'm talking about is like, for some reason, like neighboring countries never get along with each other, but also like get along with each other really well. You know what I mean? Which is sometimes charming, but if you work in policy, frustrating. But to say it very extreme, and like I know like I have like these doomer aspects to me, but we are now in an economic crisis. In an economic crisis, people vote for fringes, like they vote for the strong man fixing all of it, whatever. So we're now in a time where like you have almost every large player has like one of those political leaders who tries to centralize power, like China, India, Israel, Russia, America, like you name it, like you can go on forever, right? There's a non-zero chance that Europe becomes democracy's backup. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So, and that's worth fighting for, in my opinion. Part of that, I genuinely love in Europe that you can take a car or a train or a plane and you spend 2 hours and you have a completely different experience. Mm-hmm. And from music to architecture to for some reason, weather, and all of these aspects, and all of it is Europe. And I personally think that hopefully within this current generation, there will be like stopping to this constant discussion, like, no, this is the UK, this is not Europe, or this is not Europe, this is Switzerland. You know what I mean? Like all of this, like, I don't know, the nitpicking around like what is Europe. No, all of this is Europe. Mm-hmm. You know, maybe even more. And I hope we get this to this point where we have this kind of like European identity and also like pride and saying like we are Europeans, and as well, in my case, for example, Austrian. You know what I mean? If we get to this, I think we will have a magic unlock, which is us realizing that we're actually not these small, like, underdogs struggling to keep up with the states, that we're actually one of the biggest, largest, most important economic and political blocs in the world. But we have to like step up and like take that claim. If this makes any sense.
It makes a lot of sense. It's that's now you've got me ready to stand up and march, so that's great. What?
Get a flag.
Get a flag. Get me the Euro flag. Yeah, hang on. I've got.
Oh shit! Of course you have one.
I've got one of these. Yeah,
oh, nice. Yeah. Awesome.
It was a gift from you, my EU ink hat. You've, I mean, having been at Y Combinator, having really seen probably a lot of some really amazing and interesting people in the tech world. Who's somebody that you admire to this day? You don't have to.
There's countless. There's countless. There's also like people I admire for very, very different reasons.
Mm-hmm. Such as?
Jesus Christ. I feel like really bad by like singling out people. Like,
okay.
the way I think about this personally is I never had like one person where I'm like, this is my role model or my like the one advisor or mentor or coach or whatever it's called. I always I try to pick certain things from everybody where I think like this is like a trait I want to learn from this person, even if I disagree with them on like almost everything else, you know. And I have people that I admire for aspects and disagree with on completely other ones. I think personally, one of my favorite people in tech is still Ryan of like Product Hunt, like the guy that did Product Hunt when I joined. He's one of the kindest, nicest people. He will always try to help you before figuring out what your actual problem is. I mean, like he's like just like help first, details later. He is in general, like he's one of the nicest people out there, and he doesn't have to. Like he has all the money he will ever need in his life. He has all the network he has ever need in life. He can be the most arrogant, rich person, disconnected from everything if he doesn't want to, you know. And he's still to this day, like he's trying to help everybody he meets. And that's like to me very, very, I'm not saying inspiring because I wouldn't have the patience that he has. Okay. So it's nothing I aspire to, but it's to me something I highly appreciate about him. So if I have to give a shout out to one person, it would be definitely him. But I have actually on my blog, I have like a whole list of people and like what I learned from them. It's one of the like first blog posts that linked because I think that in every step in my life, I learned from multiple people, and I try to just summarize like this individual learning from each of them.
That's great. Tell people the address for that blog. Is it Andreas?
It's my last name.io, so klinger.io.
Klinger.io. Fantastic. Yeah. What's one of the best pieces of advice you've ever received? I'm sure you got a lot when you were in California, and you still get a lot. Is there one? And I love this spirit of taking what works and not, living everything by one mentor or one philosophy. So what's one thing that you've picked up that's really served you well? Is it this lead with helping, or is it something else?
There's multiple. The one that stuck with me is one thing that Naval said. Like Naval was the founder of AngelList, and on Twitter he's like a tech Buddhist kind of persona, like tech Jesus. Yeah. Super funny guy. Like I really like him, but he's intense on every aspect. One thing he said is like, get rid of the good to make space for the great. In that case, he meant hiring. So basically fire people, which was a bit intense. But I think it's like true for multiple things in your life. And it's like this whole idea of like, in the end, everything in your life is prioritization. And this is the hardest thing to do. Not to say like you have to cut off stuff, but also like stack ranking what's important to you, making sure that the things that are important to you actually have space in your life, because it's very easy to fill up your life with everything else and all this kind of stuff. That's one thing he said. And then the other thing he said, I forgot the exact quote, but basically the message was, don't try to be better at everything. Try to be the most extreme version of yourself, which I also personally agree with. And in my case, for example, I'm very mission driven with almost everything I do. And I always need this like higher mission to focus on. and so that I can justify to myself why I do like all these stupid things to get there. You know what I mean? And it also like gives the permission to just be yourself. You know what I mean? Without like trying to like be 80% in all the things that you suck. Just like hedge on the one thing you're good at, almost.
It's a great piece of advice. I think so many of these sort of self-help movements, especially for Americans, are always, focus on the weakness and fix it, when actually you should just take the thing that you're really good at and try and dial it up off the charts.
Yeah. I don't know if this is healthy. I don't know if this is a good advice. I will tell you.
We'll find out. We'll check back with you.
But I think it's like at least something that gives me joy in my life.
That's brilliant. Well, that's the thing. That's what it's about. Speaking of joy, what's a piece of tech that you miss from the 90s or 2000s? You've been a techie all your life. Anything?
From the 90s and 2000s.
Anything? Did you have a Zoom?
We had back then LAN parties, which was friends getting together to game for a whole weekend, like 48, 72 hours.
Yeah, LAN parties.
And the internet, and this became like really big with like World of Warcraft, but like also beforehand, the internet kind of took that away. Right. Like there's no longer a reason to meet for a weekend and do that. Hackers' houses for young people kind of replaced that. But that would be one thing that instantly comes to mind. Yeah. That's like very unique. That doesn't make sense anymore.
Yeah. It was more of it was a cultural thing around the fact that the tech, that you had to schlep your hard drive somewhere, to some, field.
Yes. And then you have like your freaking ass big computer, like your monitor, which is way too big, all the accessories, and then you have like other stuff with you to impress other people. Yeah.
I think it was 1999. A friend in Berlin took me to a Chaos Computer Club meeting, and it was a camp somewhere out in the woods of Brandenburg.
Yes.
I don't know how they did this, but they had like some military grade generator running, and everybody set up sort of like a music festival, but it was just everybody with their hard drives all kind of wired in. So, yeah. So final thought to end on a positive note. What's something that makes you optimistic about the future of Europe?
First of all, that we have finally a political leader doing everything it's in their power to give Europe a chance to catch up, and that's Trump. And that's just like, if we don't capitalize on this opportunity, he can't do all of it himself. We have to stand up and say, yes, he doesn't want production in America and like forces people to pay 10% on resources. Like, let's make production in Europe a big thing. He doesn't want international students in their best universities and have the leaders of the world come to America to learn in their formative years. Okay, then let's make these leadership places here. He doesn't want Chinese or Indian people to come there and like build their best life's work. Okay, then let's have them here, and so on and so on. If we don't capitalize on this right now, the next political leader in the States might again be having approaches that make sense. And we didn't leverage this moment, So I think this is a really, really big moment and opportunity for us. We should just like do everything we can to help him achieve his goal. I don't know what his goal is. I don't know why he does this. I think it's like, if this would be intentional, it would be the most nefarious thing anybody has ever done to a country. But if it's not, then I just don't know. But we should at least try to help him and like make Europe successful and leveraging this moment. So that's at least makes me very optimistic about the achievability of all of the crazy stuff we have been talking about in this podcast.
Absolutely. Well, suddenly things that felt impossible suddenly seem possible now for Europe. So thanks so much, Andreas, for speaking today, and all the best, and happy investing, and let's go Europe.
Bye-bye, Clark. Bye-bye, everybody.